What's up, gamers? My name's Scyushi and we're back in with some more Trove to Trove, and it's about time we had a video that wasn't just a live stream. I'll talk about that in, I'll talk about it in our time, because today we're going to be focusing on a tutorial for the ice stage, because quite a few of you guys and gals have actually been requesting this in the comments, and yeah. Needless to say, this was not actually the next character on my list. The next character on my list was supposed to be the Revenant, but there's a couple tips that I gotta get from you guys that I'll have in my community tab on YouTube, asking, you know, those of you that actually main the Revenant, just in case there's anything that I end up missing with that character, because of course he has ended up changing quite a bit. But the Ice Sage is easy peasy. So the original version of the Ice Sage was actually a really good speed farming character, because your number 1 ability was actually your number 2 ability. They did a complete reversal when they ended up reworking this character, and with it kind of ended up destroying this character as far as speed farming is concerned, just because the shield would normally give you tons of movement speed, but now that is kind of useless. You can still end up building the character towards doing like U10 and U9 and stuff like that, and arguably you're going to be very powerful as the Ice Sage, so it's not really that big of a deal. The only difference is that there's going to be other characters that do magic damage that are going to end up performing faster as far as completing dungeons in record time, as well as just having the higher movement speed, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So ignoring my super weird build, all you would end up doing just for a normal Uber farm build is I usually end up going for unyielding. If you're dying, like if anything in the game is just wrecking you, you go ahead and use this, but otherwise you can swap over to trailblazing if you're trying to go for movement speed and don't have a character at the point yet where you can just get the movement speed from the subclass ability, because otherwise I would always recommend using the knight subclass ability at the highest power rank possible, if not a full 30,000 power rank, because at 30,000 power rank your mount movement speed is going to be at 125, and even if you end up getting everything triggering on the Ice Stage so that you end up having an insane amount of movement speed, it doesn't really matter, because you're not going to end up having that for very long. So the ultimate goal that I would say, if you you know, can sacrifice Sure Strike, can sacrifice Trailblazing and all that stuff, is you're going to end up going for Chromatic Emblem and Arcane Emblem, and maybe if you're strong enough, swap Arcane for something else, but that's entirely up to you. I just like using Chromatic just because it's going to end up, anytime you end up popping a flash, you'll be able to use your abilities a lot more often. And with the Ice Sage right now, I mean, you're pretty much invincible with this character. He's actually really tanky, not so much health wise, but more so just because the way that you actually play him, you can literally spam your number 1 and keep enemies frozen like indefinitely if you time it properly. As for a flask, I always just use Death Defying. You know, it's just my go-to. It's just the easiest thing to do, just because you're not going to end up using any health on this character unless you're building it like a tank like I did, which, I mean, arguably that was based on old Ice Sage, so I don't know. But you can use Conjurer's Crucible. That's a good one. It triggers, you know, you have a chance of refilling your flask every time Magic Find triggers, and if you have enough Magic Find that you're having it trigger every single dungeon, then obviously that's going to be okay. Is it Valorous? Has a chance to recover when you deal a crit hit. Yeah, that one's okay, but it's not really that great for this character, because this character is not really about attack speed or anything like that. For normal farming, though, it's really easy. All you do is just go for attack speed. If you have attack speed on all your gear, you're going to end up doing pretty high amounts of it. But you can sacrifice it if you want to go for crit damage and movement speed. But I would still recommend you go for attack speed and movement speed. Honestly, it's just kind of the go-to with any of the characters in the game. The difference is that what you're going to actually be doing with this character in Shadow Towers, that's where it ends up being a little bit different. Because otherwise, all the stats that you want to go for is, I mean, my gosh, I don't even have the gear for him right now. Like, this is pathetic. I'm actually rocking a face that has physical damage. He's a magic damage character. So you just go for magic damage. You can cycle out crit hit if you have a high enough stat value for it. Obviously, you can see I do not have an optimal Ice Sage, but I've played the character with optimal stats, so I can just let you guys know easy peasy how it ends up working. So as far as just normal farming is concerned, I mean, in all honesty, your basic shot should end up doing a lot of damage anyways. The way that you're going to end up using this character is kind of going to be just either using your basic shot or your right click ability. Your right click ability is going to be good for a crowd. You know, it's going to end up having a lot of AoE, area of effect damage, but ultimately just your normal mouse click is going to end up being, I don't know why I said that weird, it's going to end up being fast because of your attack speed, and it does more damage overall instead of just using your right click. That said, what I usually do whenever I would main this guy in Shadow Towers and stuff, because it's all about just attacking a big group of enemies, I'll open an Ultra Spike Walker just to give you guys a quick example. Is pretty much build your character the exact same way, but you want to have as much crit damage as possible just because you're gonna need it. And the reason why I say that you can kind of sacrifice attack speed is depending on how you want to play him. So you can either use the Ice Sage where you're just using your left click, which arguably is going to end up being the most dependable, but when you're fighting big piles of enemies in the Shadow Tower, obviously they're just going to run around you, and you know, this one attack is not going to end up doing damage to the entire group. So that's where I usually would end up just spamming your right click while there's enemies around, using your number 1 to freeze them, and then when you use your ult, that's when you're going to end up popping your left click. Because when you use your ult, it's actually going to boost your attack speed to over 1000%, which is visually ridiculous. That's all it's really doing, is a visual, just visually showing you 1000%. You're not actually attacking with 1000% attack speed, okay? Like you can see right now, my attack speed didn't change much from this into using the ult, and the reason for that is because there's a soft cap on attack speed at 300%. Visually it can go higher than 300%, but 300% is the absolute limit as far as class attack speed is going to be concerned. And it's pretty crazy that you can get pretty close to 300% attack speed with just a full set of Crystal 3. Arguably is very difficult to get, but if you do that, I mean, then there's not really much of a point of even using your ult, except for the fact that it ends up reducing the damage that you take for a short time, and also ends up increasing your damage and your movement speed in general. So it is still going to be just a powerhouse when you end up using that. But again, I always liked just using my right click. It's not efficient. I mean, arguably it's just my keyboard, isn't it? I always just used my right click because I'm kind of an idiot and was stuck in my old ways of playing the Ice Sage. But as for playing new Ice Sage, just use your left click, man. Because with your classic gem ability, you can see we've got this big old explosion going on here and there, which I want to take a quick little peek just because I forget what the actual specific description is of it. So the Ice Sage's empowered basic attack freezes for 1 second on the first hit. It also chills enemies, slowing their movement speed. Enemies hit 3 times with the basic attack will initiate Pain Freeze, which is an explosive attack that does additional damage. So even though, like I said, my play style was always using the right click, again, that's just bad habits. Just use your right or your left click, okay? I might have mixed them up here and there in the video, but you're just going to be using your basic attack the entire time pretty much. And anytime you're trying to deal with survivability, you can just pop your number 1, and that's going to end up keeping the enemies pretty much just frozen. If you've got a big enough group taking all the aggro and stuff, and you know, if you're just popping your flask here and there, you can pretty much use your number 1 on one flask and just spam it, and the enemies literally won't be able to hurt you. You could even just be tapping your number 1 in case Deathifying ends up going off for whatever reason, because you took a lot of damage. I mean, ridiculously enough, you can see I'm still getting wrecked and I have 8 mil health. That's just how ridiculous Trove enemies are, and why I would say that you build pretty much every character towards DPS. There's not many characters that you can end up building towards tanks, except for the Revenant, because of the insane amount of lifesteal, in which case the amount of health that you have doesn't really matter too much, but we'll talk about the Revenant in another video. Again, last but not least, I just want to reiterate, you're not going to be going for health like I have. Don't use my stats as an example, all right? So the base stats that I would say to go for to end up being a more optimal Ice Sage is, obviously you want to have as close to 100% crit hit as possible. If you get 100% crit hit or even close to it, it means that you can swap Sure Strike off. Sure Strike gives you 20% extra crit hit. And with the way Trove works, 100% is 100%. You're hitting crits all the time. Your crit damage, I'd say you want to have at around, like, maybe for a starting tier, you're going to try to get your crit damage to 800%. Your basic magic damage to around 75 to 100,000. Just basic magic damage, and then your crit damage at 800%, and then try to get your crit hit to 100%. Now, absolute optimal, if you're gonna be like, if you're waiting to see like, when can I be a god in this game, you're gonna be going for, I think, like 100 to 150 magic damage. I'm not exactly sure what the cap is on Ice Sage, but then your crit damage is gonna obviously be a whole lot higher. I can use my Shadow Hunter as an example here with a 1,800% crit damage. My physical damage is at 160. I don't even know if 175 is possible depending on the character, but you can see I got a little too much crit hit. This is pretty much what you want to do for any character in the game, is build them towards this. But of course, we would be using magic damage instead of physical damage. And again, if you're having trouble in Shadow Towers, you can always swap Chromatic off for Unyielding. Obviously, that's going to give you the invulnerability frames after you take a hit, which should just be what Trove normally has, honestly speaking. Like, there's no invulnerability frames after you take damage, so you can literally just have all of your pots drain at once. Anyways, hopefully you guys found this video helpful in building up the Ice Sage. I just wanted to, you know, finally answer the comments, because I've seen a lot of you guys asking in the Discords and on the YouTube comments. So next up is probably going to end up being the Revenant. If you guys main the Revenant, I need your help. Use the community tab on my YouTube channel and give me some of your feedback of what it is that you actually do when you're maining this character. I mean, I arguably would end up building the Revenant the exact same as we just built our Ice Sage, outside of a little bit of different ways that you end up playing the character. I know that Shield Bash is pretty much useless now, but we'll save that for the Revenant tutorial. Thanks for watching, folks. Smash like, sub for more, and if you're new to Trove, use that sign up link down below, because then if you do that, anything that you end up buying out of the cash shop, I'll end up making a percentage of that. And I would just want to say a huge thank you to you guys, because it has seriously helped me to pay the bills, the amount of you guys that have actually done that extra mile of using the sign up link down below, because it, you know, it really makes a difference.